Hey guys, at this point in the series we modeled out our hands and our bow for our VR game. This time we're going to model out a crossbow. Since this is going to be for a VR game, we're going to keep it as low poly as possible. Let's jump into it. Okay, so let's start out by importing our reference image as usual. Image, reference. And we're going to start out with this crossbow reference image here. And we're going to create something like this, just a little bit more realistic. So let's get our image set up correctly, the right rotations and everything. So let's see what our forward axis is. This one, our forward is to the right. So we are going to rotate this guy on the x-axis, -90. Oh. We want to go positive 90. And on the z-axis, do -90. And now let's move it up so that we've got that crossbow right at about the center. Right about there. This is going to be our side view. Alright. And then we're going to use another reference image. So let's duplicate this by hitting Shift D, right? And then let's take the second one, zero out the rotations, 0. Then it looks like we're going to want to rotate it on the z-axis, -90 degrees. All right, and let's move it over, center it as best we can, and bring it down a bit on the location. Put it at 0 on the Z. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and disable the viewing of these objects in our perspective mode. So we're going to go down here to this little image here. Then we're going to uncheck display perspective. So now we can only see it in our side view. And we're going to do the same thing for this image here, our second image. Display orthographic. Alright, so now we should only be able to see these in our side view and in our top-down view, but not in our perspective. Alright, and you know what, while we're at it, let's also change the alpha, because the alpha is pretty, well, it's at 100% right now, which is going to be distracting when we're modeling. So let's check this box here, this use alpha box. Let's bring this guy down to, I think, in 0.15. That looks pretty good. And let's do the same for our first image as well. 0.15. Alright, let's make sure got these set up correctly. Oh, like it didn't save here. 0.15. There we go. Now we've got those all set up. Alright. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start out by using a box, creating a box object. So let's hit Shift A, cube. Alright. And let's change it to wireframe mode. So hold down Z, go over to wireframe, let go of Z. Alright, we're going to go into our edit mode. Then we're going to cut this in half and get rid of one side. So highlight this with our select, hit X, and delete vertices. Alright, now we've got half a box here. Now we're going to go ahead and add our mirror modifier to this box. So we're going to go over here to our modifiers, add modifier, and mirror. Make sure it's on the X-axis and turn on clipping. Alright, what that's going to do is make sure that it stays together. So like if we didn't have clipping turned on, we move the vertices. Let's select all the vertices, GX. You can see that it doesn't keep it together, like it doesn't keep it merged. But if we turned on clipping, GX, it keeps it together. Right? So that's the reason we have clipping turned on. Alright. Top-down view, let's go back into our wireframe mode, and let's just scale it down a bit. Oop, make sure we have everything selected. hit A to select everything, then scale it down. Right? Then we're going to maybe move it back a little bit. Yeah, GY, line it up with the handle. Now let's select our edge here, or all these verts on the right side. Hit GX, bring them in. Just kind of trace out the crossbow here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for this whole handle right here. Alright, and now I can see that our image is definitely not centered here, so I'm just going to go ahead and move that a little bit to the left. Have our image selected, move it to the left. Alright, and it doesn't need to be exactly perfect. We have it mirrored here, so the object is going to be exactly the same on the right and the left side, even if the image is off a little bit. So now let's go ahead and fix these edges here so that they more closely correlate to the background image. Alright, now we've got these all lined up from our top-down view, but if we go into our side view, you can see it's not lined up at all. So what we're going to do now is take all these vertices here and move them up a bit so that they line up correctly. And maybe scale them as well. Scale it on the Z-axis here. Go, bring that up. And we're just going to line it up just like this all the way down the crossbow. Alright, and that looks pretty good for our handle here. Now what we're going to want to do is add a subsurf modifier just to see where we're at with a nice smooth object. So we're going to tab back into our edit mode. I want to switch back into our solid mode, so hold down Z, go over to solid. Then we're going to go ahead and add a modifier, subdivision surface, and we can see smoothed out. It looks all right. It doesn't look too bad. Got a nice slow curve to it. All right. And while we're at it, we might as well change this shading to smooth. So right click, shade smooth while we're in object mode. All right, that looks pretty decent. We might want to refine that shape a little later, but for now we're just going to leave it the way it is. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and disable our subdivision surface modifier, just because I don't want to work with it while we're still modeling out the base shape. I want to make sure our topology looks pretty good. So hit this little monitor button here. All right. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention is move this render here, move it down to 1, because if we leave it at 2 when we export this object, it's going to add extra topology that we don't want. So we're going to move this render back down to 1, and we're going to move the quality back down to 1 as well. All right, so let's go back into our side view here. All right, now we're going to start modeling out this little section here, the body of the crossbow. And to do that, we're going to take the same approach as we did for the handle here. It's not too difficult. It's basically just tracing. The only tricky part, I think, might be this little space right here, but we'll tackle that when we get to it. All right, and I want to make sure that these top parts here are perfectly flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my magnet tool up here. Then I'm going to click this little drop down, click on vertex, so that this vertex snaps to other vertexes. So we're going to hit G, Z to move it down on the Z axis, and then drag over to this vertex right here, and it'll snap it to the same exact height as this one. All right, now I'm going to disable my snapping tool by hitting Shift Tab. That's the hotkey to enable and disable this. Move this guy up a little bit. You know what? I think I want to add another loop cut right in here, like that, and then just move these bottom verts up a little bit, just like that, to give it a nice smooth arc down like that. Okay, and now we've gotten to this point here where we've got this little hole in the crossbow for like a grip of some kind. So how we're going to tackle that is we're going to add a loop cut in the center, right about there, and that looks like it's in a pretty good position already. So what we're going to do is we're just going to select these here, these top verts here, make sure this one isn't selected. Then we're going to extrude along the z-axis, or sorry, the y-axis, and bring it forward like this, right, to about halfway. Then I'm going to want to select these bottom verts here, hit G, Z to move it along the z-axis, bring it up to there, and then we're going to select these verts here, these bottom ones, make sure the top ones aren't selected. Hit extrude along the y-axis, bring it forward, okay? And now we're going to hit GZ to bring this down a little bit. All right, and that looks pretty good. The thickness of this looks like it's about the right thickness. We don't have to alter it at all like we had to with the top one. So now we're going to extrude the top guy again. Hit extrude along the y-axis, bring it forward, okay, to just about right here where the little hole area closes. All right, select these, GZ, bring it down to about the center. Then we're going to do, ooh, this one's going to be a little different. We're going to have an extra extrusion. So hit E, Y, bring this guy over. So right about the sharp point here on the crossbow. Then we're going to bring it down by hitting GZ, down, right? And then we're going to have to extrude one more time, bring it over. Let's turn on snapping. Since I'm already extruding, I'm going to have to use a hotkey, so Shift Tab to turn on our snapping. Snap to this point here. Okay. Now let's hit GZ to move it on the Z-axis. Snap it back up here, and right now I just realized that we don't have our merge enabled for this object, so we're going to have to go over here, click on the little screwdriver and wrench, go Options, and make sure we turn on Auto Merge. Okay, and that's going to allow us to merge these vertices right on top of each other. So we're going to hit G. All right, we're going to snap these verts on top of this one, and now these vertices are merged together. So when we move this, we move the whole thing. All right, I'm going to hit Shift Tab again to disable my snapping because I don't want that on right now. Then I'm going to hit GZ to move this guy back up and thin out that little area right there. Now let's go ahead and turn back on our subdivision surf modifier to see what that's looking like. Okay, so I'll go back to this little wrench, hit the little monitor icon, and let's go back into our solid mode by holding down Z, hover over solid, and let go of the Z. And that looks pretty good at this point. Doesn't look too bad at all. Right? I think this part could be a little thinner, but it might look better after we do this extrusion over here. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's turn off our subdivision again. Let's hit 3 to go into our side view and go back into wireframe. Now let's start extruding this. Y. Gonna bring this guy all the way out to the end of the crossbow for this extrusion. Okay, now I'm gonna select these bottom ones here, move them up, so GZ. All right, select these bottom verts here, hit GZ one more time, bring it up. All right, and now let's, and the reason I did that instead of extruding one at a time is because I want to keep this topology as consistent as possible. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add some extra loop cuts in here, all right, to correct the thickness and the shape right here. All right, so I'm going to add one here, and I'm going to go down to this little thing that popped up right here, and I'm going to change number of cuts to, I think 3 is a good number of cuts. Okay, so we're going to do 3. Then we're going to go back to our select tool up here, select these guys. Well, how about just the bottom ones? Select the bottom ones. Let's hit GZ, move them up, And we're going to do the same thing for the next set. GZ, move them up. Okay, and I want to center this guy. I want to keep these middle verts as centered as possible. So GZ down, and move this guy up a bit as well. Okay. Now let's move these two up. GZ. All right, select this guy. GZ. Okay, that looks pretty good. Maybe move this up just a tad more. And this one as well. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Now let's see what it looks like all smoothed out. So let's turn this guy back on. Go into our solid view and take a look around. That looks pretty good for a base shape. I think we could use another cut or two in here to round out this area. I think that looks a little jagged to me. All right, let's turn on this little button here down in our subdivision. There we go. That's just going to conform our boxy area here to the actual mesh. Okay, I don't see any major issues at this point. It looks pretty good to me. So let's go ahead and add those loops that I was talking about right here to try and smooth out this roundness. Okay. So maybe disable this guy again. Add a loop cut here and a loop cut here and one here, and I think I'm going to add one here as well, so we can kind of thin out this area. Because if we look at our reference image, hit 3 and then Z wireframe, it's pretty thin right in there, right in this area. It's a lot thinner than this, and we're not getting that thinness in our smooth setting. So let's hit S to scale this. Actually, don't scale it. Let's just select these top ones and move it down. So GZ, move this guy down like that. Right? And maybe we want to move it over a little. I think if we move it over a little, it'll look better. So let's select all these verts and double tap G to move it along the line. Okay. Now let's select these top verts again, hit GZ, bring it down a bit. All right, now you can see in our smooth mode, we have that thinner area here, okay? And we don't really have a sharpness right over here like we do on this area. So to fix that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add another loop cut, okay? I'm gonna hold down left click and move it to the right, okay? I don't wanna move it all the way to the right until it stops, because then it's just gonna merge the vertices, all right? So let's hit Control Z to get rid of those. Then so instead what we're gonna do is we're gonna left click, drag it over just before it stops. And now we have that sharp little area down there, okay? So now let's go ahead and, try and round out this area like I was talking about before. All right, so to do that, we're gonna select the bottom verts here. Actually, the first thing I'm gonna do is disable the subdivision surface because I don't wanna be looking at that while I'm actually modeling. So we're gonna select these bottom verts here, hit GZ, move it up. Do the same thing for these guys, GZ. Kind of try and smooth out that transition. And I think these guys are a little too far over, so hit GG to move it over. Then let's move these guys up again. That looks good. I think this bottom part might not even need this extra line here. Yeah, I think this one is unnecessary. So I'm going to highlight all these vertices, switch to edge mode, and then hit Control X to dissolve that edge loop. Okay, let's go back to our vertice mode now. Maybe move these up a bit, GZ. Okay. Now if we turn on our smoothness, let's see what that looks like. Let's go back into our solid mode here. And now it looks much smoother. Looks a lot nicer than it did before. It was much too jagged before. Let's see here. All right, that shape looks pretty good. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is add a stock to this crossbow, because right now it would just be a one-handed crossbow. We want to make this a two-handed crossbow. All right. So we're going to add a stock, kind of like the butt of a shotgun or a rifle or whatever. We'll let me import a reference image and just show you what I mean and what kind of look we're going for. All right, so this is the kind of look we're going for. You can see the handle kind of has a smooth arc to it here, and then it kind of just transforms into a stock. We're going to go ahead and add that because we want a two-handed crossbow, or perhaps a crossbow that can be used either one-handed or two-handed. So let me disable this and we can get to it. Re-enable all of our other objects. All right, let's go back into our side view, and this is a little too, it's not severe enough of a curve. So I'm gonna select this, go into my edit mode, bring this guy down a little, I think. How about we bring the whole thing down a little? Let me go into my wireframe mode and select all these verts, not all of them, select all these verts. Maybe rotate it a little, see what that looks like. Rotate it on the x-axis. Okay, it's going to bring that up. Then we're going to hit G, Z, move it down. Okay, and it's already starting to look better. Right? Maybe move it over a bit. G, Y, GY. Bring it over this way. Okay, now let's select all these guys. Let's hit RX, rotate it on the x-axis. GZ, bring it down on the z-axis. GY, over. All right, that looks like a pretty severe curve. About what we're going for. Maybe just move this edge loop here up a little bit. So double tap G, bring this guy up, and do the same for this one. Double tap G, and this guy. Bring these up, just like that. I think that's looking pretty good. We're going to transition it starting right about in this area up here. Going to come back a little bit. Let's take a look at our reference image one more time. Okay, here, go into our top down. Okay, we can see kind of flat down here, so we might want to smooth out that curve we have at the bottom. This curve right here. See what we can do about that. Maybe rotate this guy on the x-axis. Let's hit G, Y, move it over. Maybe just bring it down a little bit on the z-axis. I think I may have rotated it too much on the x. Keep it like that. Yeah, I think that's going to look good. And we can always refine this shape later as well. Like anything we do is not set in stone. Always change it to our preference. So let's go ahead and start extruding that stock. So let's change to our face mode up here. Okay, let's disable this guy again. I'm going to go back into solid mode. Select these two faces here. And we're going to just extrude this guy straight back. So go back into our side view, hit extrude on the y-axis. Bring it over just like that. And we're going to want to disable our subdivision again. All right. And let's scale these faces so that they're completely flat. To do that, we're going to hit S, Y, and then hit 0 on the number pad to flatten out those faces there. Okay. And is that big enough? I don't think that's long enough. So let's hit G, Y, bring it back a little bit. All right, that looks much more proportional. Let's scale it on the Z-axis. S, Z, bring it up. that like that. And let's take a look at our reference image one more time. All right, and it looks like the top of the stock goes more straight back. All right, top of the stock goes more straight back. The bottom part kind of curves down a bit. And of course, we got that little indent right there for the shoulder. Right, let's go back to our side view, disable that reference image again. And let's just bring this down a little bit. So GZ, bring this guy down, just like that. That look good? That looks decent. Okay. Let's see what it looks like when we bring in this over here. GY. Bring that in to add that little indent. Now let's see what it looks like with our subdivision. It might look okay with our subdivision. Might be that. Oh, no, it does not. That's for sure. All right, so what we're going to need to do is add some extra edge loops up here to keep that hardness. Here. Re-enable our subdivision. And I'm going to go to our loop cut here. Hold down our left click. Bring this guy up as far as I can. All right. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom part. Bring this down as far as I can. Okay. And that kind of hardened out those edges there. All right. This part's too rounded as well on the back side. Okay, we're going to add a loop cut here. Might add a lot of poly, so we might have to figure something else out. That looks pretty good on the base of the gun here. However, that probably squared out a lot of stuff up here and down here. Yeah, that might be a little too square. So let's hit Control Z to undo that. Okay, so we're gonna have to figure something else out to square this out right here. I do believe. Perhaps come from this angle? Yeah, that looks much better. There we go. That looks pretty good. Added much less polys and it kept everything else rounded for the most part. All right, let's take a look at it from our side view. Okay, and I think we're going to want to add another loop cut right around this area to make that transition more apparent from the handle to the stock of the gun, or the crossbow, sorry. Bring this guy as far as I can. All right, and this, but we're going to need to do something with this bottom part for sure. It just doesn't quite look right down there. Now I think we're just going to want to extrude straight down a bit. So let's select these faces here and extrude down on the Z-axis like that. And then let's move it over on the Y-axis just a bit. Let's see what happens when we enable our subdivision. Okay, that looks much better. We're going to need to smooth this out for sure though. I believe this is too fat right here. We're going to have to bring this up and make it more of a concave than a convex. As you can see in our reference image, this is definitely a concave curve to the left. Right? Doesn't look too bad. Let's see if that looks all right in our normal topology. Okay, and it doesn't. So we're gonna have to fix this over here. These are supposed to give it that hard shape when we go into our subdivision. Yeah, so we want to keep those close. Alright, now this area up here is a little thin, so let's go ahead and thicken that out a little bit. Alright, that looks pretty good for that transition there between the handle and the actual crossbow, or the stock, sorry, between the handle and the stock. Now what we want to do is make this a little bit more rounded right in here for the grip. It looks a little fat and just doesn't quite look right. Maybe we select, I'm thinking we select all these faces, or all these verts right in here, and we just move them forward a little bit. So GY, something like that. Okay, select this guy, hit GG, slide it along there. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. We've got our shape nice and refined now with the transition from the actual crossbow to the stock. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a trigger. And since this is meant to be a more old style crossbow, not more modern, not like these here, we want a different kind of trigger. Like I think we have it on our other reference image, so let's go back to our side view, maybe disable this crossbow. Yeah, here we go. We're going to go for a trigger mechanism more looking like this. Okay? So let's go ahead and figure out how we're going to do that. Thinking what we're going to do is we're going to go over here. We're going to start, you know what, we're going to start with a completely new object to do that. So let's go back into our object mode by hitting tab. Okay, hit Shift A, Mesh, and Cube. Now we're going to do the same thing as we did with the crossbow, how we're going to add the mirror modifier and everything. So let's tab into our edit mode, add a loop cut in the center. Cut in the center here. Let's go into our wireframe mode and select all these verts. Hit X and delete those verts. Now we're going to add our mirror modifier here. Make sure it's on the x-axis and clipping is enabled. Let's select everything, scale it down. Alright, let's select these edge vertices, move these on the x-axis, bring them in. Go to our side view, make sure it's lined up properly. And it's not, so let's hit G, Y, bring it over just, oops, we need to select everything first. GY, move it over a bit. I think that's pretty good. Let's scale it down some more. Okay, GZ and GY over. I think that's about the right position to start a trigger at. So let's add another loop cut right here, right? Then we're going to go into our face select mode and select this bottom face right here. All right, let's go back into our side view and start extruding. So we're going to move that guy, whoops, move this guy to about here, whoops, about here. Then we're going to extrude it again, move it to about here, and let's bring it down, whoops, extrude, and then move it out here. Thinking maybe we want to rotate these at some point. Yeah, extrude this down. something like that. Now let's rotate it. So RX, I position it a little bit after the rotation. Let's add one more loop cut here, and let's move it up. And you know what? I think I want to change up this shape a little bit. So let's hit Alt, select this guy, let's hit G, bring it down, have it more of a S shape. So have it go down, up, and down again. So let's move this guy over here. Let's add a loop cut in here. Yeah. Move this guy down, about like that. And this guy down like this. Down. That's a good shape. I think we just need to move it a little bit. So let's go into our vert, select all these, move these down a bit. But we just rotate them and see what that looks like. Rotate it on the X, about like that. This down. Now let's select these verts, bring these guys down. I think I want to add another loop cut right here, because I want this to be a pretty pronounced curve right down here, right at the start. Maybe move this guy over, make this a little more pronounced as well. Yeah, or x-axis. Now let's see what this guy looks like with the subdivision surf modifier. All right, let's switch back into our solid mode. So Z solid. All right, that doesn't look too bad. That's not bad at all. We're gonna have to thicken some parts and thin out some parts just to add a little bit of character, I think. So maybe take the, let's go into top-down view. Disable this one here. You know what? Why don't we take this time to rename our stuff? So this one here is going to be crossbow body. This here will be crossbow trigger. Whoops. Trigger. All right, now let's disable the crossbow body. So we're just working with the trigger here. What we're going to want to do here, I think, is select this here. Whoops. Let's go. You know what? Let's go into our wireframe mode. So we select all these verts, scale it on the z-axis. Oh, that's not going to work. Let's just select these verts here, and let's move those out. So GX, move them out like that. Let's disable our subdivision as well. I don't like working in subdivision. Bring these guys out. Go back into our solid mode. See what that looks like. And that looks pretty good. Let's enable our crossbow body. Yep, I think that's good for the trigger. Let's smooth that. So tab into our object mode, shade smooth. That looks pretty good. You know what we're going to do now is we're going to change the origin point so that it pivots along this area here. So to do that, we're going to disable our crossbow body again. We're going to go into our edit mode. And we're going to select this vert here, and we're going to snap the cursor to that vert. So we're going to hit Shift S, cursor to selected. Now our cursor is there. All right. And then we're going to alter the origin point of this object. Let's right click, set origin to 3D cursor. All right. So now when we rotate this object, it rotates around that origin point. So rotate it on the x-axis, and you can see the trigger will actually get pulled when when we alter this in Unity. So rotate x-axis, that looks pretty good. Okay. All right, next thing. Let's work on the actual bow part of the crossbow now. So this area here, okay? Oh, you know what? We never thickened this part out. So let's go ahead and do that as well. So let's tab into our edit mode. Let's go into our wireframe mode. I want to disable this trigger here. I'm not looking at extra geometry. I'm just going to select this area here. Let's turn off our subdivision. Okay. Let's hit GX, move it along the x-axis, go like that. Let's do that all the way down the crossbow. All right, and now you can see this area here is just far too thick after we went ahead and thickened this out up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go through and maybe thin these bottom edges here. Use our GG hotkey to just slide these verts along the edges there. I'm going to do that for this one too to make it a little bit of a smoother transition. Okay, and we're just going to do that for all these edges right in here to thin this out and make it look a little more natural. All right, so we've thinned that bottom area out quite a bit. It looks a lot more natural, just a much better. So now we're going to go ahead and add that bow area that we were talking about before, this area right here. So to do that, we're going to start out by creating a cube object, just like we did with the trigger. So let's tab into our object mode. Let's hit Shift A, Mesh, Cube. All right, and again, we're going to do just like we did with the crossbow body. We're going to switch into our edit mode, cut that, and switch into our wireframe mode, delete all these verts here. Okay, then we're going to add our mirror modifier on the x-axis, enable clipping, and then scale it down. All right, now let's move it up. G, Y, get it into position right here. And this is too far back on our crossbow. If you take a look at it from around here in solid view, it's just way too far back. When we get the actual shape that we want for this bow, when we're done tracing this, we're going to move it forward and maybe make a few slight adjustments so that it just transitions to the crossbow better. But for now, we're just going to leave it where it is. And let's disable the crossbow body here so we can see a little better. Switch back into wireframe. Move these guys over on the x-axis. Whoops. GY, move back. Okay. That looks like it's lined up pretty well. Hit extrude along the x-axis. Bring it out this way. Rotate it on the z-axis. Bring it forward on the y-axis. And we're just going to do that all the way along this bow object here, keeping it as low poly as we can, because again, this is for a game, so this is going to have to be a very low poly object. Right, so we've got our basic shape here for the bow object attached to the crossbow. What we're going to do now is see how it looks with a subsurf modifier in solid mode. See if we need to smooth some things out. Subsurf. Let's turn on this area, or this little box here. Alright, it's looking pretty good. I think we may want to adjust this area here just a little bit. Maybe this one. Maybe make this a little bigger. Something like that. This guy up as well. Maybe scale this guy down. Whoops. Need to make sure I selected all of our verts, not just the front ones. All right. That looks pretty good. I think it's a bit too severe of a curve right in here. Let's see. Let's go to our top down and enable our crossbow body. See, so our string is going to be going straight across, right? If we pull the string back, it's not going to go back very far. So yeah, I'm going to select everything and just kind of scale it on the y-axis. Scale, y, make it a little flatter like that. I think that's going to be a little better. All right, now let's go ahead and move it into position. I think that's a little bit more accurate of position right about there. GZ, bring it up. GY, bring it over there. I think that's a pretty good position for that. We're obviously going to need to make some adjustments here to kind of cover this part up. Oh, you know what? Let's change our shading to smooth on this guy. Go. You know what I think might look cool is if this had a little bit more of an outward curve going to it. So let's hit tab. Let's go back into our wireframe mode. This guy, hit GY, move it in a little. Same thing for this one. There we go. It almost look a bit like a recurve bow almost. So GY, GY, something like that. All right, I think that looks pretty cool. All right, let's go back into our solid mode here. Okay, let's select our crossbow body. And let's make some adjustments to these verts here to maybe cover up this intersection here. Just bring that area down. That. You know what? I think that might be good enough. Is it just that simple? Maybe select these guys. That. I think it's just that simple. Alright, that looks pretty good. Then of course we're going to need to cover this up with like some ropes or something. Right. I think that wraps up the base. Oh, nope, we forgot the track. We want a track right here for the arrow to lay in. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all these faces right down here. How far back do we want to go for that? to about where the trigger is, about there. Okay, now we're going to hit Shift D to duplicate these faces, right click to leave them exactly where they're at, right? And then we're going to hit P to separate all the selected faces into a new object. Now we've got two objects over here, Crossbow Body 001, we're going to rename to Arrow Track. Crossbow Arrow Track. Okay, let's go back into our object mode, select the actual arrow track object, and let's scale it down on the x-axis. Something like that. You know what? Now that I think about it, we want our arrow track to probably be as straight as possible, right? So we probably don't even need all those extra faces and edges in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab into my edit mode, go into edge here. Let's remove the subdivision surface. We don't need that, that's for sure. We do need our mirror modifier, so I'm going to leave that there. Let's go ahead and select all these edges here. Oops, not that one. Hit Control X to get rid of them. It might look kind of cool being wider back here, so I'm going to leave that. Then let's move this guy back down this direction. Out there. Right? I think that looks pretty good. And then maybe we want to extrude it up a little bit. Okay. Extrude this guy up on the z-axis. Alright, and now I want to select everything and move it down on the z-axis, just so it's just inside the crossbow body. Alright. Move it down just a little more. I think just about there. Alright, now let's add another loop cut. Right about here. Okay. And we are going to select these faces. You know what? Before we do that, I want to add an extra loop cut. Add an extra loop cut right about here. Okay. Now let's select those faces. So this one. Let's delete those faces. Right. Then we're going to select some edges. This one and this one. All right. And we're going to extrude it straight down to create that little track area. Extrude on the z-axis, straight down. All right. Let's hide our crossbow body so we can see the track a little bit better. All right. And let's turn on our snapping. Shift tab, move this guy down. Make sure all those verts are correctly paired. Looks like they are. Or correctly merged is what I meant to say, not paired. Okay. Let me select these faces here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these edges. No, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this face here, hit X, delete that face. Then I'm going to create another edge loop right about there. Right, and then we're going to select this face and extrude it over to the right, just like that. Okay, that should create our, oh, let's get rid of this face right in here. Delete that face. That looks pretty good. So that's going to be our arrow track right there. Maybe round this out back here. I think that'll help the shape a little bit. Select that guy. This guy. How come it didn't select that guy? Is there a problem? There might be a problem. Yep, there's a problem. We left the face right here. So let's get rid of that face. Alright, so now we're going to select this guy again. Make sure it goes all the way around, which it does. Then let's select this area here and just move it forward. So GG. Oops, GY rather. GY. Forward. That. Okay. Now we're going to need to create a little folder for the string. So to do that, we're going to extrude this guy up on the z-axis. Right? Then we're going to select this guy right here, this edge, bring it forward. Something like that. Oops. GY, bring it forward. Turn off snapping, we don't want that on. Then we're going to create another edge loop right about there. I think we want to move that guy up though, so hit GG, move it up. Then we're going to extrude this guy straight out, so Y, out. And then let's scale it on the Y axis to 0, so it's flat. All right. I think that's pretty good for our little string holder object. Might be a little large. Here. Let me move this back, correct this right here. Hit GG. Put it up. Let me turn on my snapping. Hit GY, snap it to this vert. Thinking that is pretty big. I think maybe I just select these top ones here. Over on the x-axis. Kind of like that shape a little better. Maybe select all these vertices, or all these faces up here at the top, and just bring them down. You bring them down like that. We're going to need to bring this guy back to flatten that out. Alright. And you know what? I don't think I want this object smoothed at all. So let's select everything. Actually, you know what? Let's go into object mode. Then just hit shade flat. Right? Re-enable our body here. Make sure that's above these faces. Is. Alright, that looks pretty cool for the basic shape of the crossbow. I think in the next video what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some detail objects, like the wraps that we can see in our reference image there. We disable this guy. You can see there's some wraps here, and we've got some little metal inlays and whatnot. We're going to go ahead and add those in the next video, maybe like a little ring right here on the front. That might be kind of cool. But for now, we're going to wrap up this video with a basic crossbow. You've got the body shape. You've got some nice little arrow tracks. We got a stock. This should be a pretty good looking two-handed crossbow. And Phil should, if you want to stop it here, you can maybe go watch Steven's video or Stash OG, and he'll show you how to texture it, and then Phil or Nullity will show you how to actually bring this into Unity and program it, and then you'll have a working crossbow in VR. So see you next time. Laters.
So don't stop, get it, until you're cheddar-headed. Watch the way I navigate.